everyone. I am here with my daughter, Kinley. It's been a long day. I just got home at 10 o'clock at night from school. I had volleyball tryouts after school, so been a long day. I tried recording this twice at school, and somehow it never actually uploaded correctly. So third time is a charm, but haven't had many baby snuggles during the day today. So hope you don't mind. She's going to join us for the loom, and hopefully we can make it through with her staying in a good mood here. But topic we're going to talk about today is emergency preparedness and the importance of having an injury game plan. So whether you're looking at potentially going into athletic training or any type of occupation within the medical field or even just coaching, this is something that is very, very important to try to keep everybody healthy, but also in the event of an emergency, understanding everybody's roles and how to best manage the situation. So when we're talking about emergency preparedness, we're talking about being properly equipped and trained for any medical crisis or disaster. Development of an emergency action plan is essential. It is a formal document that's going to outline the steps that should be taken in the event of a medical crisis or disaster. This is customized to each facility. So whether it be a school, an organization, a company, really any business should have an emergency action plan. We're going to talk about them as they relate to schools as well as sports teams, but emergency action plans are important, like I said, to many different businesses, corporations, stores, things like that. So there are four main components of an emergency action plan, and each of them will have these same categories. So emergency personnel is going to be who is involved. What are the jobs of those people involved? Things like, is there an athletic trainer on site? What is the role of, let's say in an athletic situation, what is the role of a coach? What is the role of the athletic director? What is the role of the host management? In other words, the athletic director or the person who is in charge of that game manager. And like I said, what are their jobs? So let's say two football players collide head to head on the football field. One is unconscious. Who is going to tend to that athlete? Who is going to maybe make a phone call to that athlete's parents? Who is going to call 911? Who else needs to be notified within that school? And again, what are all of their roles? It's really important. Otherwise, you have kind of too many chiefs and no Indians, maybe. Too many people kind of looking to lead the situation and nobody actually listening, or everybody kind of waiting for everybody else to step up. So understanding who has what job. Emergency communication is the next part. This includes phones and contact information for emergency personnel. Obviously, we know that in an event of an emergency, we would call 911, but a lot of times there's other people that need to be called also. Let's say that it is fall season and there's a volleyball game, a football game, and a soccer game all happening on the same day. Obviously, if there's one athletic trainer, that person can't be in multiple places at once. So thinking about making sure all of your coaches have the phone number for the athletic trainer in case there's an emergency at the soccer field. So we can call the athletic trainer while she's over at football. She can then come over and help the injured athlete. So who needs to be called? And another component of that is if you think back to prior to any of your sports seasons that you've participated in, you've always filled out an athletic permission slip, gives contact information. So then what our athletic secretary, Ms. McCormick, does is she compiles a whole list for an entire program. So for example, Mr. Schreiber for the cross country team has a list of all of the cross country athletes, their parents' contact information, any other pertinent information like their any allergies that they might have, maybe their address, maybe their primary care physician's contact information, things like that. So if there's an emergency with that athlete, we can real simply call their parents and we have kind of a quick spreadsheet of all of that information. Emergency equipment is also part of the emergency action plan. So if you're thinking about a swim meet, for example, listing the locations of lifeguard tubes, listing the location of the backboard, making sure that those lifeguards have those pieces of equipment handy to them. Everybody knows where an AED is in case somebody goes into cardiac arrest and you need to grab an AED. At Waterford High School, we are very fortunate. I believe we have 11 AEDs located throughout the building and also throughout the athletic fields. So for example, I know that if I'm in the main gym, my closest location of an AED is in the atrium. Transportation is another one. So things like making sure that there's an ambulance on site for high-risk events like football. Those of you who've been to a football game here at Waterford High School know that at our football games right outside the concession stand, you'll always see the ambulance, making sure that we can reduce that response time if there's an emergency, so we can increase the survivability, increase the outcome for that situation. Other things along with transportation include kind of going back to emergency personnel and communication, knowing who is going to call 911, and then knowing who is going to direct that ambulance or fire truck or whatever, whoever is responding to the situation, who is going to direct them in. What is the best route? What is the address of the location that you are at? Maybe what door they should enter in. I know, at Waterford High School, when there's an emergency, let's say in my classroom, we don't want them coming in the commons because it's not close to where you want them to be. So telling them exactly which road to come in, which parking lot, which door to enter, making sure that somebody's there to meet them at the door, things like that. It's all part of the emergency action plan. It all helps just manage the situation and help allow that person that needs help to get help as quickly as possible. We're going to watch this video actually in class. Identifying a medical emergency. In short, a medical emergency is a threat to life or limb. So you see all of those things there: cessation of breathing, severe bleeding, no pulse, concussion with loss of consciousness, neck or spinal injury, fractures, dislocations, eye injury, severe asthma attack, heat-related illness, and signs of shock. Those are all threats to life or limb. Now, not every fracture or dislocation is going to constitute a medical emergency. For example, you fracture a finger, you dislocate a finger, not necessarily a threat to life or limb. Sometimes it kind of pops right back into place. Sometimes fractures are small. Sometimes though, if in the situation of like a compound fracture where you have a bone actually sticking through the skin, that is definitely a threat to limb. It just kind of depends on the severity of some of those things. But again, threat to life or limb, typically going to be defined as a medical emergency. Non-emergencies, on the other hand, life or limb is not threatened. So things like abrasions. An abrasion would be, think of a baseball player sliding into second base, all right? You kind of scrape off that top layer of skin. That would be an abrasion. Minor cuts, strains, sprains, minor concussions, bruises, etc. By the way, if you don't know the difference between a strain and a sprain is actually a pull or a tear in a muscle, whereas a sprain is going to happen at the joint. So that is a pull or a tear in the ligament. So you would sprain your ankle, you would strain your hamstring or your quad. EMS system, if you hear us referring to that is simply the response system in a particular area that is going to be called upon in the event of a medical crisis, consisting of trained personnel in the ambulance, fire truck, equipped medical vehicle to transport the injured victim to the hospital. Oops, I don't know how to go back in here. Can I go back? Anyway, now I'm really struggling. All right, sorry about that. I've got the right slide up again. So if an emergency action plan is done right, emergencies become manageable, everyone understands their role, and the victim is helped as quickly as possible. So think about, the fact that we can't always prevent somebody from getting hurt. We can't always prevent somebody from dying, unfortunately, but hopefully we are controlling the situation to the best of our ability, and we're not causing anybody further harm. The situation is managed, everybody knows their role, and we're able to figure things out as quickly and efficiently as possible. Some things to remember: these emergency action plans must be written down and they must be agreed upon by all of those people involved. You can't just have one person create it, never show it to anybody else, and just expect it to happen. You need to share it with all of the people involved. You need to make sure you're practicing it. Here at Waterford High School, we have typically every fall a meeting with all of the coaches throughout the season. And Christy comes in, she talks about our emergency action plan, roles of coaches, roles of assistant coaches in the event of a medical emergency, who's going to be there assisting the trainer, who is going to be contacting the parent, so on and so forth. Another thing to remember as part of your emergency action plan is emergency medical cards should be on the or the bench at all times. That's kind of going along with that list that Ms. McCormick gives us with contact information, allergies, any other important information about a particular athlete that we may need to know about. Maybe it's pre-existing medical conditions or things like that. We're going to do this activity in class. Pre-participation physical exam is now we're looking again at more of how can we be proactive? How can we prevent emergencies in the first place? All athletes are required to get a pre-participation physical exam, which is a comprehensive assessment of their overall health and their ability to perform a sport. It's going to identify problem areas in that athlete's history. So things like concussions, asthma, maybe a history of shin splints or ankle sprains or something like that, just for the coach to be aware of. So maybe they can base their training off of trying to strengthen certain areas so that certain injuries don't happen again, and just really being aware of what that athlete has had in the past in their history. And this must be completed prior to participation. So again, you're seeing some of the common components of a pre-participation physical exam, things that may be discussed or examined within that. Here's a list of a picture of a questionnaire that you may see while you're getting a pre-participation physical exam, just looking at that medical history. And upon completion of the physical, hopefully you'll be granted permission to participate in sports. There's oftentimes 3 types of clearance. The first one is the ideal situation, which is unrestricted clearance, meaning, yep, you're full go, you can participate. We don't see any reason why you shouldn't be held back. And number 2, clearance after participation in rehab. So maybe, hey, you're coming back from an ACL tear. We're working on still strengthening. I want you to continue seeing a physical therapist, and maybe your physical therapist will clear you after participation in some rehab. Number 3, in the unfortunate situation, maybe that a physician does not believe that sport is in the best, or that participation in that sport is in the best interest of the athlete. Sometimes they will not be granted permission. Examples, maybe a football player's had too many concussions and they feel like another brain injury another concussion could result in brain injury. That may be a situation where they do not get clearance for that sport or for certain sports. Again, emergency medical cards we've talked about. I'm going to skip over that. And actually that is the end. So we will continue talking about this in class the next time that you are in person, and do some activities, look at some actual emergency action plans to make this come to life and make this make a little bit more sense. So Kinley and I say thanks for watching, and we'll see you in class.